Hello, fight fans. Micah Fights with Friends doing the breakdown for this gigantic heavyweight rematch this Saturday. Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic. Everybody, please hit that like button if you like what I do here. If you want to join the family, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to ring that bell so you're notified whenever I post a new video, or go live like this Saturday starting at 3:30 p.m. Pacific for UFC 241, Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic. Let's get into the basics. Daniel Cormier, of course, 22-1, a light heavyweight champion, a heavyweight champion, a first ballot UFC Hall of Famer, literally one of the greatest of all time, one of the best wrestlers of all time. And what can you say about Daniel Cormier that hasn't already been said? Stipe Miocic, the longest reigning defending heavyweight champion of all time. And he's been waiting a minute for that rematch. He was calling for it. And now we got it. Let's go back a little bit to that first fight, though. I remember looking forward to this fight for the matchup of wrestler versus striker, which is what I thought it was. Just, you know, how big of a superstar each guy was in my mind. Bigger than life. First, you had the challenger. You had Daniel Cormier, the family man. There with his wife, the children. He still wrestles at a high school, coaches a high school wrestling team. I mean, was a super humble guy coming into this. And you had Stipe Miocic, of course, the real life superhero. I mean, the heavyweight champion of the world, spending 40, 50 hours a week or more, putting out fires, climbing up these ladders, risking his life to save others. I mean, have we ever had two guys that we thought were more good guys coming into a match than that? The worst part about this coming into this was I didn't want to see either one of these guys lose. Stipe Miocic, of course, was my favorite fighter coming into this. Daniel Cormier, a close second. So in ways, this was a hard fight for me to watch. But, of course, we know what happened in the first fight. And that was Daniel Cormier pulling off a huge upset in the heavyweight division. It was one of the funnest fights that I've ever called and one of the funnest endings. Let's listen to that playback again. You can tell I could barely contain myself.
Oh, big elbow of DC! Oh my God, Daniel Cormier just knocked out Stipe Miocic! Stipe Miocic is completely unconscious! The referee is bringing him up! Daniel Cormier is the heavyweight champion of the world! Are you fucking kidding me?
So, of course, that has really become one of my favorite moments in Fights with Friends, in MMA history, one of my favorite fights, and kind of strange that it happened, when my favorite fighter got knocked out and Daniel Cormier became a double champ, the light heavyweight and heavyweight champ. Just shows you, I really do have a lot of respect for Daniel Cormier as well, but I've been waiting for this rematch. I think that Daniel Cormier should have given this rematch a long time ago. I thought the UFC should have booked this well before they did and not played around with all that Brock Lesnar BS. But let's get into the prediction of the fight, actually, though. Stipe Miocic, 36 years old now, 18-3, of course. One of those losses to the man he will fight again to try to take that belt back. And here is his last fight. First round knockout over former champion Fabricio Verdum. Same thing to Alistair Overeem. Same thing to Junior Dos Santos. Then he was actually an underdog against the monster Francis Ngannou the heavyweight coming into that, and Stipe Miocic showed everyone that he was much better than Francis Ngannou, dominated that fight. And then Daniel Cormier came back, made the most of his opportunity, and put Stipe Miocic out. Now, of course, there was some controversy with that fight, as you might all know. There were several eye pokes from Daniel Cormier, as you can see in this picture. I mean, I would hate to think that Daniel Cormier is a dirty fighter. This picture does not make him look good. Watching fights afterwards, it just really seemed like he definitely wasn't working on closing his hands as he was bringing those hands in for punches against Stipe Miocic. And you see the aftermath of his face afterwards. And all those cuts pretty much are from eye pokes and scratches from Daniel Cormier. So, I mean, that looks you got busted up in a 5-round fight. I mean, that's probably the most damage we've ever seen on Stipe Miocic's face in a very short amount of time. And I said a lot of that, if not most of it, from eye pokes. But we'll go back to the record. Like I said, 5 in a row. Just lost the last one to Daniel Cormier. The most title defenses by any heavyweight champion ever, and thought to be maybe one of the greatest heavyweight champions ever before that last match. Still could be one of the greatest. Daniel Cormier, let's talk about him. He's 40 years old now. We're just about 2 years removed from that first fight. 22-1. This guy's done it all. Heavyweight champion over in Strikeforce, heavyweight Grand Prix champion over in Strikeforce, now light heavyweight, and heavyweight champion of the world over in the UFC. The big game in the last 5, you can see. The only blemish, the no contest that was overturned, that head kick knockout that came back against John Jones. And you look now, it seems like it's been longer, but it's actually only been a little over 13 months since he fought Stipe Miocic at UFC 226. Impressive outing in his last 5, though. The finish over Volkan Ozdemir, the second round finish over Anthony Johnson, the Derek Lewis fight, that was kind of a little bit of a weird situation because we weren't really sure why Derek Lewis was getting the shot. But that just shows you how good Daniel Cormier is. In a way, I think that we can go back on that and say, man, as good as Derek Lewis is, he has no business in here with the champion. And he really didn't. But I'm going to go to Stipe Miocic, what was going on in that fight before the eye pokes. I don't know how much the eye pokes affected the fight. It really did seem to affect Stipe Miocic's sight, though. Daniel Cormier talked about timing that elbow off of that transition. Daniel Cormier has had several surgeries since the first fights. That came him a little bit after the Daniel Cormier fight. He really hasn't been out all that long. Odds are pretty close now to where they opened. Cormier, a minus 152 favorite. Stipe Miocic, slight underdog at plus 125. Guys, I'll tell you, I would not want to bet on this fight. And anybody that tells you that they know definitively who's going to win this fight, and this is how I feel, that they have, a really good idea of who they think is going to win this fight, and they can really give you an educated guess on this. I would say that either they have some inside information or they're just not being realistic. because this is such a hard fight to call. Now, these guys have recently talked a little bit. Each of them had a few things to say about each other. Let's start with the firefighter, with Stipe Miocic, the former champion, and this was a news interview where he talked about wanting to get his belt back from Daniel Cormier. Let's listen in. And there you go. He says he thinks he is the better fighter. Thinks he can get it. Wants to get his rematch. He is getting his rematch. Now, he said he was caught with a shot that he didn't see coming. You got to wonder, why did he not see it coming? Did any of those eye pokes have anything to do with that? Could have been. He definitely looked like his vision was blurred for a minute. He did not ask the referee for timeout, though. I believe he could have gotten up to 10 minutes, or 5 minutes to rest, but he did not take that time. Now let's hear what Daniel Cormier, the heavyweight champion of the world, had to say about his former opponent and once again challenger Stipe Miocic. So there you go. Daniel Cormier adding fuel to the fire, saying he does not think Stipe Miocic is good enough to beat him. I highly disagree, but one of the reasons it's so hard to call this, and Daniel Cormier talked about this himself, Stipe Miocic is the longest reigning heavyweight champion ever, and that's with 3 defenses. I mean, that's how volatile and up in the air the heavyweight division is. As we've seen in the first match between these guys, it only takes 1 shot. Stipe has that shot. Daniel Cormier has that shot. Both of these guys, they can take each other out in just 1 shot. I think Stipe Miocic comes back, though. I think he's been working on the timing. I don't think he's going to get caught by that same move from Cormier. Cormier is a little older. He's had 2 surgeries since. Stipe Miocic obviously staying in shape, doing the firefighting. I talked about what a great camp he had, and the most important thing, I think, is how hungry he is to get that belt back. He wants that belt back so bad. And I don't know if Daniel Cormier knows it, and he probably wouldn't admit this, but I think Stipe Miocic has more motivation to get that belt back than Daniel Cormier has to keep it. And for that reason, I am picking Stipe Miocic to come back. I say he knocks out Daniel Cormier inside 3 rounds. And once again, the new heavyweight champion of the world, Stipe Miocic. I will be calling that, of course, on this Saturday. Make sure you join us for the Fight Companion, the only Fight Companion on YouTube, with combat trivia during the Fight Companion. But I want to know what you guys think. Let me know down there in the comments. Who do you think wins this? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Is this just such a hard one? Like, Mike, I have no freaking clue. But I think what we can all agree to is we cannot wait to watch this fight as fight fans this Saturday, August 17th, ESPN Plus pay-per-view, or if you can't get the pay-per-view, listen along here on Fights with Friends. If you do have the pay-per-view, I hope you still come listen along, join the community here. for this incredible matchup, maybe the biggest matchup in the history of the heavyweight division. And what a tremendous card UFC 241 is. Several other fights that I'll be releasing videos for the breakdowns of those. And we'll get into that in other videos. But guys, as always, I love you. I respect you. And I'll see your fine ass this Saturday, August the 17th.